any questions, now is the time to ask them. Please say who of the speakers you're addressing yourself. I think you might have overwhelmed the students.
I have one, to some extent it's not addressed to anyone in particular. It might even have been best addressed to Scraton when I had my opportunity, but I suppose I might think that there would be more of a difficulty in being multidisciplinarian than we might have given credit for. Part of it is that we don't want to do away with the concept of expertise in a given subject. And I think, and a final point I'll say why I think expertise in law and sociology would be requisite before you could take a legal perspective or a sociological perspective on the other. One aspect I hope to comment on is why isn't there someone on our panel who's an expert in inductive logic? The point being that I often think when you sit down with people of other disciplines, really I'll come out with my jargon and they'll come out with theirs, and we really don't have a common lingua franca by which we assure that we aren't in fact talking past each other. The one thing that I think unites the humanities and is the basis of the unanimity of the humanities, unity of the humanities, is in fact inductive logic, which I think we even have in law. We call it reasoning by analogy. The thought of if we want A to be like B, and A has characteristics X, Y, Z, B, W, X, Y, what is it about X and Y in both cases that provides a basis for saying that A and B are the same thing? Inductive logic, I'd love to go to a course in that, is really my approach. And finally, just one little comment, and once again, I really do have a risk of ignoring the theme of humility. I sometimes feel that, at least from a doctrinal scholarly perspective, that there's a bit of a straw man fallacy whenever sociological perspectives are taken in law. I sometimes feel that we are really cast off as having a system of mechanical rules that are inflexible and don't react well enough to the concerns of contemporary society. But I think that that doesn't take account of the fact that lawyers view the law as normative. These rules are constitutive of the practice, you know? In the same way that a judge can't make up his own rules, otherwise we do away with the rule of law. I can't start picking up the football with my hands and throwing it in the net. Then we no longer have a game of football. So I think sometimes the challenge might be, you know, that coming back to my further point of expertise, that in order to comment meaningfully upon a practice, sociology, I'd have to do so much reading in it, I feel, before I could put it in its best light and then bring something of worth in my analysis of it. Is there a danger, therefore, of multidisciplinary in having a jack of all trades, master of none? Sorry.
Yeah, who used that phrase? Was it Phil? That is one of the difficulties of being seen as a. I mean, I must say, being in the discipline of sociology, I used to worry about that I'd meet people who'd say, oh, their specialism was whatever, and then they'd ask me what mine was, and I didn't know what mine was, and it took me a while to actually sort of relax with that and realize that I was in a great discipline. It's an imperialist discipline in the sense that we study society. Now, what isn't society? You know, like we could study anything. We could take over the whole world in that sense. So I took that as being a positive, and therefore said, well, I didn't really have to specialize. I didn't have to be the world's greatest expert on Bordeaux or whatever. You know, I just followed my instincts. But I do think that there is a problem of appearing to be a jack of all trades. But the analogy that I prefer would be not from the world of industrial labor, but from the world of music. That to say, you know, if you want to play jazz, you've got to know your instrument well. You've got to master it first, and then you can improvise with it. And I think that that's the next step that multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary is. You are at home, you are comfortable, you're skilled in your discipline, and you then move with it somewhere else.
I would take issue too with you. I think there's a distinction between disciplines and methodologies. Disciplines are for institutions like universities. Methodologies are for people like you who are doing a research degree. And disciplines are there to help you develop your methodology. You're not there to protect And I think if we get confused about that, you end up in that position where you're claiming to be in an imperial discipline. I think the most important thing is to develop your discipline, to develop your training, and that can take you into different disciplines where you're not a jack of all trades, you're developing a very distinctive way of looking at the world, which is, I think, about doubting the world. And that's what we've got to remember. And I think universities should be encouraging their postgraduates to develop methodology using the disciplines that are available, have been around for 150 years. And so I don't see it as quite as simple as the individual being representative of a discipline as such. They're representative of methodology. And it's methodology, not theory. And I agree with Phil was going on about applied methodology and applied theory. I think there's high theory doesn't do it for me either. And I think it's very difficult to deal with high theory. It has to be applied. I call that developing your methodology.
I've got more. So shall I just read them all out and then the panelists can take them in turn? I'll start with who I start with. Bill. Bill, you talked about cultural studies, and I think it was one of the last interviews before Stuart Hall died. He lamented the limited impact that he felt cultural studies have had either within the academy or within practice. And I'm just wondering maybe if you could offer any insights as to why he thought that. Was it because the discipline had become too eclectic or too broad or something? So I'll give you some time to think about that. Rory, you were talking about doing a law degree, and you were lamenting the fact that issues around justice, for example, weren't taught in your own case until quite later. So I'm wondering, is there a kind of a conflict between doing a professional degree like law and doing critical research? So what I'm asking is, would the US system, in your opinion, be better where law is taught as a graduate subject and students come to law having studied political science or sociology first? I don't know what you think about that. John, you talked about the silos, like English, history, whatever. I'm just wondering why you think that is. Is it because of the role of the church historically in the 12th, 13th century that pushed, because we still have the terminology like deans and some universities still have rectors. I'm just wondering, is there a early religious church reason for this, do you think? Being a medievalist.
Encouraging me to be a medievalist,
And Katy, everyone started talking about the interdisciplinarity of theory. I'm just wondering what you feel about interdisciplinary research methods, and if it's possible to even have that, because you probably know that the faculty is pushing for this generic research methods training across all our disciplines, sociology, politics, law, whatever. I'm just wondering how you think, where do you see that leading to, or do you think it's possible? That's the end of my speech.
Okay, well, I start with the easy one. I don't know what Stuart Hall thought in his last days, honestly. I've never met him, man. I suppose my answer would be sort of twofold. One is that it did get a reputation. Cultural studies did get a reputation of being too smart-arsed, and therefore it was easy to poke fun at it, And especially when it started getting locked into strange, navel-gazing, postmodernist ways of looking at the world. So that, for example, I remember an old ad that some of you might remember where it was for BT, where the woman was on the phone and her son's doing his exams, and she says, "Oh, he got an A in sociology or something." She said, "Oh, that's great, you've got an ology, that's all that matters, There was a sort of sociology was there, cultural studies was there, and sub-basement was probably media studies as being this sort of stupid thing which just tells you the obvious, that newspapers are sexist or whatever, But, so I think that it was an easy target. The second thing, though, that I would say is that just as cultural studies grew out of the times, it suffered when the times changed. Culture studies was definitely placed on the left, and so as things changed with Thatcherism and everything else, although they had a great critiques are not necessarily what pull in the big money for research, especially when your institution such as ours is saying that we must be bringing in thousands of pounds a year each in external funding. So I think it suffered from the change in the politics and the change in the times.
Thanks, Graham. And your question was about, is there a tension between the professional requirements of a degree like law, developing critical thinking, and the potential is there for precisely that. So one mega solution is the US and I think Canadian model, as you say, that law is done as a postgraduate degree, so people have already been trained in another discipline before they are subjected to what some people might see as a particular way of training people to think in a narrow and critical legal scholars would say very hierarchical method of thinking. On the assumption that you can't go for a mega solution like that on this side of the Atlantic, the practical steps would be to build windows in professional law degrees where people are exposed to other disciplines, are otherwise exposed to questions of how law interacts in society, and not, so that may be through encouraging are requiring even first-year students to take a minor subject alongside their major subject in law, which is the practice of Lancaster, for instance, or by, as we have at Ulster, have lots of law and degrees, so people have to do law and criminology or law and politics, or where you do have a single honours law pathway, you create options in which these wider social critical thinking questions can be explicitly explored. Or of course there's another way of doing it, which is that you get on board, get those people who are teaching the professional legal subjects on board with the teaching of critical legal studies, for instance, through the medium of the law of contract. So there's different ways of addressing that problem.
Oh, no, I've got my answer. I was thinking of International Women's Day, so you better do that.
That was last week.
I know.
Okay, stop me if I go on because I have strong opinions about this. Partly as Director of Education in Sociology.
I didn't ask you because I didn't know you had strong opinions.
Yeah. No, it's great, I've got a platform now. First and foremost, I should say I do believe that research methods can be highly interdisciplinary and in a very constructive way, most certainly. And indeed, theory is interdisciplinary. I mean, high theory is interdisciplinary. The best of it is. So methods certainly too. And I was involved in some preliminary discussions about how we might begin to have shared training at postgraduate level in research methods in the faculty. And it was a really interesting discussion. In terms of epistemology and training in that, I think there'd be a lot of, you need to do that very well. And of course you are writing in sort of general terms about positivism, for example, realist approaches and critical approaches. I mean, there is a generalization there, but that's not to undermine its usefulness. And then of course specific training in relation to qualitative, quantitative, and various approaches within that. I mean, there was an interesting discussion there last semester in anthropology about ethnographic approaches, an interdisciplinary workshop there. And it was very revealing the way that different disciplines use ethnography in very different ways, and they kind of think they're doing it the right way, but by communicating on that, it actually really affected a lot. And it was very useful and informative for all involved. One aside, if I might mention it, I use discourse analysis as a methodology in my doctoral research. I've used it a bit since, and in terms of using it as a basis for collaboration and career development, you might say, I use it as a basis for a book. First use editing a special issue of a journal and then a book later on. And people contributing to it were from various different backgrounds. law, history, English, etc. And I think that was a good lesson for me of as methods being a way by which we could sort of find common ground with other people from very different disciplinary backgrounds, but with a shared general interest. And our interest is in discourses around conflict and peace. That said, I should confess that one of the quickest turnarounds I've ever had in submitting a journal article for review was when I submitted it to Discourse in Society. This is a long time ago. And I submitted it at 9:30 on a Saturday morning, and at 9:50 I got a rejection from Jean Van Dyke, who just said, "This is not discourse analysis," which is very common. I met somebody the other day from Canada who said he had the same response. So there are some people, of course, within methodologies who want to preserve a particular way, but that doesn't prevent us from collaborating and finding a really useful way of it being informed from other disciplines. In terms of postgrad training in the faculty, it's going to be very different, as you may know, and it's much more about generic skills as opposed to substantive, theoretically informed methods as it's being designed at the moment, which is a real missed opportunity, I think. But I'll stop there.
I did get the easiest question, I think, because I think the medieval church has absolutely nothing to do with the silo mentality I was talking about, apart from the fact it gives a vocabulary and jargon to university structures. So talk of canons is a kind of theological concept that's being secularized, and deans, as in ministerial structure, are, it's a theological concept. But that gives me the opportunity, having denied that, now to talk. There's maybe the church set up the universities, but having denied that, we now talk about what is it that makes these silo mentalities. And there are a couple of things. One is current university policies and politics and structures, and vice chancellors who come in with visions and recreate things, or deconstruct or reconstruct the same things, as we're probably about to see at Queen's again, because we're a new vice chancellor, and the University of Ulster can't be far behind, because sooner or later you'll have a new vice chancellor who will restructure. And in that restructuring, there's a lot of politics and a lot of agendas, and those politics and agendas are all about funding. The funding and the future of a subject, or the decline of a subject, or the removal of a subject from the curriculum, are all essentially political decisions, not and usually couched in terms of student demand or in terms of ref or RE results. And in each case, you can interpret things. If you get a poor ref result, for example, is that the reason, the ref being the Research Excellence Framework, is that the reason to close a subject, or is that not an incentive to basically enhance the subject by pumping more money in? I can tell you what our universities think is the answer to that one. But so what you've got is the kind of veneer of the kind of Russell Group veneer of the kind of the theological jargon describing Russell Group experience, the research-intensive university, where I think the major flaw in the whole setup is that teaching and research have been bifurcated, and we don't have a profile every 7 or 8 years which takes a snapshot at how we do our teaching, how we do our research, and provides us with our funding on the basis of that snapshot. Instead, we have occasional glimpses of our teaching profiles, which really, what's the reward for getting a good teaching profile? More students, and then we also then have this regular analysis of our research called the research assessment exercise, now the research excellence framework. And that's why we have a silo mentality. We have league tables, they're all over the place. We're the most over-assessed education system in the world, and that's why people naturally are navel-gazing. They look after their own immediate patch and don't think beyond it, and they protect it, they put up barriers. The barriers are often historically there, but the barriers are really, they're in the mind, not necessarily going to be everlasting, but they get reinforced and perpetuated by the external pressures of funding, essentially, and politics in university setting. So I think I'm probably describing a medieval kind of feudal structure, but if I am, then it's 21st century feudal structure as well as a medieval one. But I think the medieval church had nothing to do with current silo mentality that we're doing. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, then I think we can move on to the next speaker. So, Rory, please take it away.
Okay. So I just read them all out, and then Katy will
set up, and it's been set up through the Institute for Cooperative Research and Humanities at Queen's, and it seems to me to be an object in how the University of Ulster and Queen's can work together, because if you scroll back through the events on our Institute website, you will see that our success in getting, it was £500,000 we got, but we're going for, I think, another $250,000 to enhance it. It's working completely, and you were saying, somebody was saying, no, I think it was you were saying you'd done a joint application and couldn't remember who'd written what?
No, joint.
A joint publication?
Publication.
Yeah, well, we've got a project going where we've got very definite strands where everyone wins. University of Ulster specialists win, we win, and when you look at the application, the big ideas are ideas that have been shared, and that is a project that will be launched in May. It's AHRC funded. There are 5 have been funded in the UK. Ours is the only one north of Birmingham. So Scotland didn't get one, Wales didn't get one, north of England didn't get one. The Northern Irish one is based in Belfast. Is covering, it's a regional centre, but it's covering all of Ireland and all of the UK as well. It's taking certain themes forward, and you can imagine our themes are the kind of troubled past and building on troubled past. So that's good news, and that is an object lesson. If you and Queen's work together, they do far better than if they're paranoid about each other or they try to be smart with each other. And when you want a letter from a governmental source to support an initiative, you'll get a far better letter if you're working together than if you're fighting with each other. That's been my experience.
And just to add to that, there's some very good examples of collaboration between the institutions. Scraton does a lot of work with Linda Moore, for example, and they recently published a book together that was launched just a few months ago. We also have collaboration between, say, our colleague Louise Maunder at TJI and Kieran McAvoy with Moffat in Queen's, and they do a lot of work around dealing with the past, which fed into the HAS process, for example, recently. And then we also have these excellent initiatives like this particular one today. Congratulations again to the organisers. And also one of our PhD students, I know, Stephanie, I'll just point you out if anyone. Stephanie is looking to set up a reading group on Middle East. And that is a reading group that is open to people from the different universities in Northern Ireland. So there's different opportunities and examples of collaboration between the institutions.
And now that I'm emeritus, I don't have to be nice anymore. So, no, I'm not being nasty for the sake of being nasty. I will say that there are all sorts of collaborations, and there are even romances that have blossomed between the 2 institutions, so it can't be that bad. On the other hand, there's a mentality in place from the top down, which sometimes reaches down very low through the institution, which is discouraging of collaboration. And there are reasons for that. Again, if we keep coming back to funding today, I talked about the REF, and John mentioned it there. Across the water, dependent on your score, you get a markup and the amount of money you get to run your school or your department, based on the score and the research, right? It's through HEFC. We compete in the same thing, in this thing, the same way as they do across the water, but in point of fact, we don't get the funding from HEFC, we get the funding from the Department of Education and Learning. And the Department of Education and Learning have only 2 places to give their money, here and there, right? And what both Vice Chancellors do is that they say, give it all to me, or give most of it to me. And so that is working against collaboration, because each of them is trying to badmouth the other, to catch the other out, to try to get the bulk of the funding. And that has its effects that ripple right down through the institution.
So would you say then that, yes, there are some great collaborations, but we're due more to the individual
They're bottom up.
efforts?
They're bottom up.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I would say to use it, think of it positively. So just like here we can think about cooperation across the border as a kind of nice way to internationalise fairly simply. Similarly with cooperation between UU and QUB, just down the road and be able to meet people from have a different perspective even within the same discipline. So use that, and as I say, putting forward suggestions about research groups or reading groups, that's a brilliant idea.
There was a question somewhere at the back.
Yes, I had a question. I don't, after all of this though, I'm not sure. It was more of a, actually just more of a practical question. In doing a PhD, would you say when it's better to stick with one discipline, or would you say go for an interdisciplinary approach? Just on a very, very practical level. Because I'm realizing that methodologies are actually quite discipline specific, as are theories. So what would you say?
Well, my talk was about that question, and I think you know, why did you choose your topic? I think the first thing is what makes you passionate about that topic, that makes you want to do it, and then what tools do you need to do that, what do you want to do, and that's your discipline. And institutions will split you up into schools and things like that, but really it's you that decides it. You know, I turn the question back to you and say it's not something that's extraneous to you or extraneous to the reason you chose the topic, and the nature of the topic you choose determines how you answer that question.
And also remember the other point you made, be careful then at the end who you get as your examiners.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a great answer. I know it's not a great answer for you, but
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, do we have questions? Because I'm about to send you all off to drink wine since people are waiting for us. I suppose I'm just going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for coming today, speaking to us from the PhD point of view. It was very informative. It gave us a lot of food for thought. And because we're on record, I just want to thank my colleagues for helping me organize these events, and to Mark and Kevin on the University of Ulster side, because this was a joint event in more than one ways. It wasn't just collaboration between fellow PhD students at Queen's, it was a collaboration